While jogging is a healthy activity, those who perform it could easily wind up falling victim to predators lurking in the dark, desolate roads, and alleyways. Here are 8 horrifying jogger stories that'll send chills up your spine. Number 8. Ali Brugger mysteriously gunned down. The summer of 2016 proved to be a terrifying time for joggers in America as 3 young female runners were killed in the country's northeast region on separate occasions within the space of 9 days. The first victim was Alexander Ali Brugger, a 31-year-old registered nurse and writer from Michigan's Oakland County. In the afternoon of July 30th, Ali was running her usual 10-mile route down a rural road in Rose Township with her headphones on, minding her own business. But at one point along the road, she was brutally shot 4 times in the back and left for dead on the front lawn of a nearby home. An inhabitant found her bleeding on the grass and called 911 before administering CPR until the first responders arrived. Ali was pronounced dead at the hospital. According to her father, Ali wished for her organs to be donated, but the senseless way she was murdered made that impossible as her body was extensively damaged. The killer's motive and identity remains a mystery, but investigators believe that the killer was likely familiar with Ali. State police are still looking for a light-colored 4-door sedan that had been speeding near the scene during the time of the murder. Number 7. Karina Vetrano raped and killed. On the evening of August 2nd, 2016, 3 days after Ali Brugger's murder in Michigan, caterer and blogger Karina Vetrano went jogging around the Belt Parkway in Queens, New York. When she failed to return home after hours of being out, her father, who she was staying with, went out looking for her. At around 9 p.m., he found his daughter's lifeless body lying in marshes near Howard Beach, bruised all over and with her jogging pants halfway pulled down. According to forensic reports, the 30-year-old woman had been brutally beaten, raped, and strangled to death. Foreign skin was found underneath her nails, which along with some other findings proved that she had been struggling against her assailant. However, a DNA match of the skin samples could not be found in law enforcement databases, and officials remained without a clear suspect for months. It wasn't until February 2017, around 6 months later, the prosecutors managed to charge a 20-year-old man named Chanel Lewis for the murder. He was unemployed, had no criminal records, and lived in Brooklyn with his mother. His DNA matched the samples taken from Karina's body, and he confessed to the crime. According to Lewis, he was angry over some personal issues and snapped suddenly for no apparent reason when he crossed paths with Karina at Spring Creek Park. He admitted to committing murder but refused to take responsibility for the rape. Number 6. Vanessa Marcotte. Burnt body. Vanessa Marcotte was a New Yorker who grew up in central Massachusetts. On August 7, 2016, she was visiting her family in Princeton when she decided for a quick afternoon jog near her mother's home, but the 27-year-old Google employee did not return to the house in the evening, and her family reported her missing later that night. Vanessa's dead body was found in a wooded area, unclothed and partially burned. Investigators believe that it's likely that Vanessa was sexually assaulted and fought back hard without success. She may have injured her assailant, and foreign DNA was found on her remains. The attacker probably knew his DNA was all over his victim's body and tried using flames to destroy the evidence. However, he failed to do so as her body was not entirely burned. As of now, the DNA is yet to match anyone in the database, and the killer remains at large. Vanessa was the 3rd female runner to be brutally slain in America's Northeast in the space of 9 days during the summer of 2016. After the aforementioned Ali Brugger and Karina Vetrano, the events shocked authorities, and the unsettling parallels between all 3 slayings initially led to a suspicion of a serial killer at work. Although they occurred in different states, all 3 victims were rather successful and attractive brunettes of a similar age. In some pictures, Karina Vetrano and Vanessa Marcotte looked eerily similar to each other, and according to many, could be mistaken for sisters. But while Karina's murderer has been caught, the 2 other cases remain unsolved. Number 5. Maria Alves killed in Central Park. The three murders of female joggers in 2016 caused renewed interest in one particular cold case murder that occurred 2 decades prior. The case involved the death of Brazilian immigrant Maria Isabel Pinto Monteiro Alves, who was training for a New York City marathon on September 17, 1995. While she was running through Central Park around 6 a.m., the 44-year-old was savagely beaten to death. The weapon used was a blunt object, perhaps a pipe or baseball bat. Her murder made headlines and police got a ton of tips on the case, but months and years went by without the murder being solved. A can collector named Adolfo Martinez was heavily suspected, with multiple key elements pinpointing him as the murderer. He was seen heading towards Central Park that morning and returned with blood on his hands and pants, according to witnesses. On top of that, Martinez was a drifter with previous arrests for sexual assault. However, he was never convicted and died of tuberculosis in 1997, 2 years after the homicide. Following the 2016 murder of Karina Vetrano in Queens, New York investigators reopened Maria's cold case homicide by classifying the case with an exceptional clearance. Adolfo Martinez was convicted posthumously as the murderer in January 2017, finally closing the case that had remained unsolved for 21 years. Number 4. Kay Turner slayed on Christmas Eve. In 1978, Kay Turner and her husband were spending Christmas Eve in a rented cabin with their friends in Camp Sherman, Oregon. Kay went out in the evening for a jog, but never returned. Almost 1 year later, a state highway worker named John Aykroyd, who was one of the last people to see Kay alive, led police to Kay's dead remains and clothing. According to Aykroyd, the finding was accidental as he stumbled upon the remains while walking his dog in the woods. This story would be disproved by authorities over a decade later. In 1990, Aykroyd became a prime suspect in the disappearance of his 13-year-old stepdaughter. This resulted in investigators to also zero in on him for Kay's death back in 1978. Subsequent investigations led to the conviction of Aykroyd in 1993, along with his colleague Roger Beck, who was an accomplice to the crime. In December 2016, Aykroyd was found dead in his cell at the Oregon State Penitentiary, having died of natural causes while serving his life sentence. Number 3. Rebecca Bletch, shot in the head. Rebecca Bletch was an active woman who jogged daily along a quiet road in Dalton Township, Michigan, where she lived with her husband and daughter. On the evening of June 29, 2014, she spoke to her family, who were out of town, on the phone before heading out to jog. That was the last time they heard her voice. Rebecca's lifeless body was found an hour later by passers-by in the middle of the road about a mile from her home. Attempts to resuscitate her at the scene failed and she was pronounced dead. It was initially thought to be a classic hit-and-run case until closer inspection revealed bullet casings at the scene, and an examination of Rebecca's head showed a gunshot wound. What puzzled investigators was the fact that all her valuable items remained with her, making robbery as an unlikely motive. It wasn't until 2 years later that Michigan authorities charged Jeffrey Thomas Willis with the murder. This man was already under 2 other separate charges of murder and attempted kidnapping, and a gun found in his van matched the bullets in Rebecca's case. The 47-year-old man's motives are unknown, and he had no connection to his murdered victim. Even his wife was unaware of her husband's secret life as a criminal, and the state prosecutor simply referred to him as a sick individual. Number 2. Craig Sitzma, mauled to death by dogs. One day in July 2014, 46-year-old Craig Sitzma was out jogging in Metamora Township, Michigan. Having beat colon cancer, the dedicated father of 3 knew the value of good health and maintained an active lifestyle to keep disease at bay, but his routine jog that day laid him low as he was viciously mauled by 2 adult cane corsos. The 200-pound dogs appeared suddenly on a rural road, and Craig screamed and begged for help as they bit him repeatedly. A couple who lived nearby heard his cries and went to the rescue. The boyfriend shot at the dogs with his gun, forcing them to flee, while his paramedic girlfriend tried to stop Craig's bleeding by using a belt as a tourniquet. He was rushed to the hospital, but soon died of his injuries. The cane corsos had been running loose in the area for months, and it was their third attack within 2 years. This prompted neighbors to arm themselves, including the man mentioned earlier. The dog owners were Sebastiano Kiliata and wife Valbona Lucic, an undocumented immigrant couple who had been extremely negligent with their pets. They were already warned by vets about the dangers that their dogs posed, yet still left them to roam freely outside the kennels. The couple was eventually charged with second-degree murder and sentenced to 5 years in jail. Their 2 dogs were euthanized, along with a third that wasn't involved in the mauling. Number 1. Dave Stevens. Hacked with a machete. Dave Stevens was a dedicated and passionate runner from Dallas. He regularly woke up early in the morning to run 10 miles along the popular White Rock Creek Trail before heading off to work. On October the 12th, 2015, the 53-year-old's life was cruelly taken away during his morning run by a madman wielding a machete. Dave was slashed and stabbed repeatedly and died from his injuries at the scene. It took more than a day before police identified him through his fingerprints, and the news deeply traumatized his wife. Surprisingly, former Texas A&M football star Thomas Johnson called the police and confessed to committing the slaying. The then 21-year-old was suffering mental issues and randomly targeted Dave out of frustration for recently losing his house. Meanwhile, David's wife, Patty, suffered greatly, having lost her husband of 25 years. She lost her will to live. Police received a call from neighbors claiming to see vultures circling over Patty's house, who they hadn't seen for days. After forcing their way into the house, officers found Patty's dead body lying on the garage floor next to a running car. She had apparently committed suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning. In some cases, they were wielding different weapons such as axes, knives, or baseball bats. Due to numerous incidences reported in the US, by the middle of October 2016, the killer clown trend had spread all over the world, reaching more than 18 countries